Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SANS webcast, Modernize Security Operations Using Cloud SOAR, sponsored by Sumo Logic. My name is Carol Auth of SANS, and I will be moderating today's webcast. Today's featured speakers are Andrea Fumagalli, Senior Director, Custom Engineering at Sumo Logic, Victor Popescu, Security Solutions Engineer at Sumo Logic, Girish Bhatt, VP at Sumo Logic, and Matt Bromley, SANS Certified Instructor. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenters, please enter them into the questions window located on the GoToWebinar interface at any time. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to our presenters.
Fantastic. Hey, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. Matt Bromley here from SANS, and I'm excited to be joined by quite the trio of folks from the Sumo Logic side. Today, we're going to be talking about modernizing security operations using Cloud SOAR. If that was not obvious from our title, I wanted to offer a little bit of quick insight before we kind of get started into this and before we start to break this down. I think this is one of the most important presentations and one of the most important topics that security operations centers out there that SOCs need to be watching and need to be listening to. And I'm gonna bring a little bit of very recent experience to this discussion as well. You're gonna hear from me and the rest of the Sumo Logic team as we work our way through this webcast, but I wanted to kind of give you all a little bit of a verbal story to set the stage for this before we start getting into the nuts and bolts of what Sumo Logic does here. But you know, we're fresh off the heels. We just came out of the SANS Blue Team Summit. I believe it was last week or 2 weeks ago, maybe 10 days ago, so about a week and a half ago. And during the Blue Team Summit held by SANS, and huge shout out to John Hubbard and Justin Henderson who helped pull that together, and all the great speakers. But during that summit, during those talks, I was glued to the screen because what I was seeing and hearing is that security operations teams and security teams and SOC managers and everyone all the way up, they're looking for ways to make their jobs, their day-to-day, more efficient. They're looking for ways to increase productivity. They're looking for ways to find more value out of their data, and they're looking for ways to really stop adversaries a lot earlier on and have a positive impact on the environment. On their environment, I should say. And the interesting thing about that is the way that a lot of folks are going about that is exactly what we're going to talk about today. They're looking for ways to orchestrate and automate parts of their job. And we're going to talk about what parts it is we should be looking to orchestrate and automate in just a moment. They're looking to bring multiple tools together. They're realizing, and this is something I've been talking about for years, so I'm super happy to see this, you know, kind of in a day-to-day thing. They're realizing that we can't have single source telemetry security systems anymore. We can't have, you know, large enterprises and we only look at one particular piece of telemetry, or, you know, we only look at one particular subnet and we ignore the rest of it. So we're seeing this really good adoption, and I hope we continue to see more and more of increased visibility and increased awareness that we need to automate. We need to make cybersecurity this thing that is done in the background partly for us. The menial tasks are done in the background for us. We need to automate away the things that take way too much time and make too much manual effort. And that allows the security teams to go and solve problems like we saw delivered at the Blue Team Summit. They get to do some amazing engineering and really level up their security capabilities. So with that little kind of precursor in mind, I'm excited today to be joined by the Sumo Logic team and explore this content a little bit further. So I'm gonna start off. You know, I've already kind of given you a little bit of a bedrock of where my head's at with this, but I'm gonna start out by identifying what we're gonna call the SecOps challenges and an introduction to SOAR as a concept, and then I'm gonna hand it over to the Sumo Logic team because they're gonna walk us through some really cool concepts about how they approach this. So from a security operations perspective, and again, I'm pulling directly from what I'm hearing and seeing when it comes to kind of defenders and gripes and rants and raves and things like that. And the challenges, I think, are pretty consistent year over year, but they also are interestingly easy. I don't want to say easy to solve, but I'm going to say solvable. First one being quantity of data. And this is something that I hear from security teams, you know, for way too long now. We're just drowning in data and data formats. And the problem here, I just spent a moment telling you that multiple types of telemetry are needed in order to correctly and effectively secure an environment. But that doesn't mean we just turn on every single fire hose and just consume and we go from there. New technologies and telemetry does not increase, it may increase the size of data, does not necessarily increase the fidelity of that data. So that's one of the first issues is, hey, Matt, we don't have a problem with quantity. We have a problem with quality and refinement. And that leads us directly into problem 2, or the challenge number 2, if you will. Just giving you a bunch of data from your environment does very little for an organization. If I use this in a lot of classes that I've taught, and I'll just throw out the question there. If you could have full PCAP of your entire environment, would you be able to detect any and every threat that was out there? And the short answer obviously is no, because having all that wonderful content does not mean you can make sense of it. So data by itself does very little for an organization. We need to be able to enrich our data in order to classify it, in order to detect threats, in order to look at those higher level advanced analysis techniques. If I want to bring in things like custom detection engineering, machine learning, artificial intelligence, if I want to bring all of these different technologies to the table, I need to be able to do more with my data than simply just look at it. I need to be able to enrich it. I need to be able to action off it. And then challenges 3 and 4 really get into organizational structure. And this one, unfortunately, is all too common across a lot of organizations out there. The first one is lack of processes. A lot of folks watch webcasts like this and they read some great content from folks at Sumo Logic and they say, yeah, I'd love to do that. That looks great. I want my security team to look like that. But that's very equivalent to, watching a superhero movie, if you will, or something out of Hollywood and saying, oh, I want that car or I want that setup. But then not having anything in place. You're dreaming. That's really the basic way to say it. If we don't have processes in place, you don't know what it is you need to orchestrate, what you need to automate. And furthermore, legacy processes, and this is a hard realization, legacy processes may not be appropriate for SecOps, may not be appropriate for SOAR. And what I'm really getting at here is we may need to reinvent some of the way that we do things in order to achieve that level of efficiency and optimization that you're looking for. And last but not least, my final challenge here is implementation complexity. And this really is, again, an organizational thing. This comes down to, even if I gave you the best laid plan that was custom tailored towards your organization, would you be able to effectively implement it? And would you be able to effectively get that ROI you'd expect to see on a program like this? And this is where a lot of organizations, they're great at the first 40 to 50 to 60% of an implementation, and it's that last piece that kind of falls off. They fall into headwinds, agents of change come through. They're not very happy about the way things are going. And that's really what's needed to effectively get yourself to that state of SOAR, that state of security, orchestration, and automation. You've got to accept where we may need to make significant change, where we may be able to make minor change, and then work on implementing those in a way that makes sense for the organization. And I know the Sumo Logic team is going to talk about this as well. So before I hand it over to them, I wanted to kind of quickly just reorient everyone on when we talk about SOAR, what do we actually mean? This is, in my opinion, finding ways to make scalable solutions to the issues that security teams face. And when I say scalable, I mean I can quickly go from one to many. That's where our automation comes in. So automation takes those manual and low-level processes, automates them, or allows my analysts to scale them. And what I mean by that scale perspective, which I think is an important attribute of SOAR here, if I give you one investigation, if I give a whole security team one investigation, one alert, I would be pretty confident that team could handle that one alert. I don't have any issues with that. I don't have an issue with how manual that process is. But if I take that same security team and I give them 10, 20, 100, 500, 1,000 alerts, how quickly can they scale their ability to handle those? Really, really good security teams with excellent SOAR implementations, they don't balk at numbers no matter what comes in the door because they're able to scale efficiently. The other side of that is obviously orchestration. Being able to scale efficiently means you have a confident viewpoint on your environment. That's only done by integrated tooling all together that correlated, cohesive perspective into the organization. I can't move effectively or efficiently or confidently if I don't know what my next step is, or I don't know what the adversary's next step is. And then last but not least, the other important part of SOAR is the response side of things. It's really easy to sit here and connect a bunch of tools and data points and automate low-level processes. But if that's where we stop, all you've done is make it easier to analyze alerts. The response piece is really where SOAR soars. And sorry, it was a little bit of a dad pun, but nonetheless, it works. This is where SOAR really is effective, is it makes it easier for your organization to respond to threats. Remember I talked about in automation, this allows the analyst to free up to work on human problems, custom tailored response actions, whether it's in a playbook, an incident response plan, or some other sort of SOP that the organization's got in place. Response is really what you're leading up to here. So by orchestrating and automating, we're freeing up the organization to not have to do that low-level enrichment or alert handling. No, I'm freeing up my analysts to know how to respond to incidents and ensure that's handled correctly. So with that said, that's my introduction. That's my starting point for here's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about ways to find scalable solutions and make this a little bit easier for some of our defenders out there. So Girish, are you with me, sir?
I am, Matt.
Excellent. All right, I now get to hand it over to you for the exciting part of the presentation.
I think that was a great setup, Matt. I think I'm going to come up with a T-shirt saying "SOAR soars," right? So I'll give you partial credit for that.
Okay, I like it.
That is a great setup, Matt. So again, folks, Girish Bhatt at Sumo Logic. I've always been a longtime fan of SANS and the programs and the events that you put together. So that was a great setup. So I quickly want to revisit what Matt just said. I think I'm paraphrasing what Matt said. Don't try to solve legacy problems using modern tools or solutions, right? Because there are better ways of doing it. Let the dead stay dead, right? Meaning the legacy tools. So that's what we are seeing, folks. Because I think that's a great segue, because we look at SOAR or the current tools and technologies as a way of not only disrupting or rehauling how a SOC is being built. So that's a key point Matt made, and I wanted to reemphasize that. So what I thought I would do, folks, is I have my colleagues, Andrea Fumagalli and Victor Popesco. They've recorded some great videos. So I'm kind of a setup to before you get to watch the power of Sumo Logic Cloud SOAR. So what I thought I would quickly do is for folks who may not be familiar, saying, who is Sumo Logic and what are we doing in a SANS event? By the way, we have been doing several SANS events this year. We appreciate the partnership with SANS and the lead instructors like Matt, Crowley, Shackelford, and others. So in a nutshell, Sumo is we've been around for about 11 years now. So we are a very innovative cloud native solution provider. Everything that we do is we have a cloud native approach to things to solve problems for the security practitioner, for the CISO, as well as for the observability leader. What's really cool about our approach is, at least from my perspective, is we have a single cloud native platform that you can use for security, for IT operations or observability. We don't try to say, hey, you have a separate cloud you need to buy. It's a single platform, folks, because in the modern world, you need to bring modern ways of doing things, not having different ways. So a little bit about ourselves as a company. We are roughly about $250 million in annual recurring revenue. We're a run rate of 250 million plus now from an ARR perspective. We are a global company. And what really makes us unique is the ability to scale up both whichever way you want. And I'm sharing some metrics here. On any given day, we see hundreds of thousands of active users. These are not the provisioned users, active users using that platform. And data analyzed in terms of records and sheer data That's 10 to the power 15, folks, if you were to do the math, right? Because this is indicative of what a modern cloud platform can do today. And many of our customers, by the way, are using us for security related use cases. So I'll talk about that a little bit. So in terms of driving business outcomes, Matt talked about the importance of modernizing security operations. We think of this broadly as providing the right solutions to make people more efficient. Matt touched upon this. It's the concept of a tier 1, tier 2 analyst is completely changing now as you have better tools and better ways of doing it, right? And that's what we mean by modernization. We want to provide solutions to not have legacy workflows. You need to have modern workflows for problems that exist, as well as the modern attack surfaces and vectors. Our customers use our solution for building compliant solutions. What does it mean? Sure, we are SOC 2, Type 2 compliant and all those things, but also HIPAA, PCI, and a lot more. So in other words, if you fall into those categories or industries where you have to have a compliant solutions, we provide that. And then Matt kind of referred to this. The tool consolidation is an ongoing problem, folks. This is where we do very well. So what does it mean from a security solutions perspective? We have our single platform, a cloud native platform, can be used in different ways. You can do things on your own. You can use it as a compliant platform to build use cases already known. Or you can say, hey, look, I want to security monitoring and analytics. This is the visibility, posture management, workload protection, that sort of thing, right? So you can do that with that platform. Or if you say, hey, look, I want a SIM because I want out-of-the-box detection, and then I want to, we call them insights, not events or alerts or noisy alerts, we call them actionable insights. And then that's where a SOC team would say, hey, okay, I want to get started with my detection and investigation and response as well. And recently we acquired a company called DF Labs. That's an Italy-based company, and that's where Andre and Victor are currently, actually. And now it's part of our cloud SOAR offering. What we saw is the need for for security practitioners to do more by leveraging the power of machines. I think Matt talked about this. Like it's about improving the incident response, or time to detect and time to respond. More importantly, when it comes to a SOAR, how do we do that? We offer a good portfolio. So that's a quick overview of what we do from a security perspective. And I think at this point in time, what we are going to do is we're going to have a recording by my colleague Andrea that I think Carol is going to play for us now. Carol?
Cloud SOAR helps to resolve some of the most important challenges for the SecOps teams.
So this is going to be a good overview.
The first one is to minimize the
Cloud
response
SOAR,
time,
introduction,
reducing the attack surface, reducing the legal exposure of the company, and protecting the corporate resources as soon as possible. Second challenge is to reduce the analyst fatigue. We know that the number of attacks is continuously growing. Every SOC is suffering resource shortage. So ability to automate standard operating procedure is fundamental. And last but not least, the third challenge is to improve the efficiency with very detailed reports to provide additional visibility, and with the option to consolidate processes to achieve consistency and compliance. Here you can see the 5 very important assets provided by Cloud SOAR. First of all, number 1 is the open integration framework to improve the ease of integration. This is a tool which helps to create new integrations, new connectors with external technologies to orchestrate actions in these external technologies. And it helps to implement cyber and non-cyber use cases. Second asset is the ability to have insight and alerts easily triaged in a pre-event validation to focus only on real threats. Then the third asset is represented by the progressive automation to save time, improve processes, implementing standard operating procedures. Fourth pillar is insightful decisions, the ability to have all, let's say, tasks and decisions to take grouped in one place with the option to have suggestions provided by the machine learning. This is what we call supervised active intelligence. And finally, the last very important feature is represented by a fully customizable dashboard where you can customize all the metrics representing the important variables. Here in these slides, we see some of the brands we integrate with. It means we can orchestrate actions into these technologies. All the connectors are already available off of the shelf and published in our community. With these connectors, you can implement different type of actions, which are described here. Green are typically enrichment actions, light blue are notifications. Then we have customizable actions with purple, user choices in dark blue, and finally, the different type of remediations and containments. Automated are the red actions, or manual tasks are the orange actions. Here you see an example of a playbook representing a typical case, phishing. You see the different type of actions. Green are enrichment, for example, collecting the geolocation details, resolving URLs. And then we have the blue actions for pushing out notifications. And finally, the purple diamonds, where different conditions are evaluated combined with Boolean operators to take a decision. Or the other alternative is to have the analyst choice. This is an operator asking the user to take a decision and provide an input. And then, depending on the decision that has been provided, of course, the playbook will continue till the end. Just before the end, as you can see here, we have a manual task asking to review what was done so far, and these will be automatically assigned to an investigator. All in all, this processing took 4 minutes, which is a great result considering that for the phishing cases, usually it's about of hours. The SecOps dashboards is a place where we have the tasks pending for the specific user and the user choices that he has to answer, plus suggestions provided by the machine learning. So only working in this unique console, the SOC analyst can keep everything under control and can apply decisions and new actions with just one click, and they will be automatically propagated into the system. Now let's jump immediately into Cloud SOAR and see how it works in real life. When we log in, we land into the dashboard. The dashboard is a collection of fully customizable widgets to describe what's happening in the platform. So statistics on the incident, the trend on the day, and then maybe some specific diagrams in different forms, pie chart, bar charts, tables, and so on. Each one is drillable, so you can drill down, you can see what are the details inside and what are the characteristics of each and every incident. Each one of these lists is an hyperlink, so clicking will take us into the real incident itself, so we can review the details, the characteristics, the playbooks that have been executed, the phases where is the incident, and so on. From this dashboard, of course, we have access to another one, which is the SecOps dashboard that we mentioned previously. And here you can see what's the status of the different tasks which are pending for a decision. And for each one, of course, you can perform actions directly from here. You can jump and see what is the incident, what is the playbook where this task was created in, and of course, you can jump directly into the task. If we click into the incident itself, we will arrive here. We see here what are the main characteristics of this incident. On the right-hand side, we have a series of widgets representing the different let's say, set of info that are relevant for that incident. And then here we have a series of additional sections, including, for example, the different workflows or the different entities which have been involved and so on. So anytime that we are here and we want to work on a specific incident, we can jump directly into the corresponding playbook, even from that specific link. Now, here we have the representation of the workflow that has been assigned. In this case, it has been automatically executed, and it's now hanging on this task that is supposed to be completed by the analyst. For every box, of course, we can see what are the results. For example, ingesting insights from CSE. Here you can see all the different characteristics and properties of that specific, let's say, insight. And then, of course, the next actions can use details that have been retrieved from CSE exactly here for continuing the processing. In few minutes, my colleague Victor will explain with a complete deep diving how to create a workflow, how to invoke it from an automation rule, and how to implement the full automation. Now, these actions here are implemented through the concept of automation, and the automation is represented by mostly this section that represents the real OIF. This is I mean, here is where we can activate the different connectors with the external technologies, for example, CSE. We have here the different actions. Every action is described with, let's say, the source code, which is here. You can modify and so on. And then, of course, these actions can be used when defining the different playbooks. So here you see a series of different playbooks, each one representing a specific workflow. So one by one, you have the ability to define, let's say, different standard operating procedures with different operators, different box, and different actions. The last section that I want to introduce, which is very important, it's the entities. This is where we automatically, let's say, gather and extract all the relevant IOC from the different incidents. Here for H1, of course, we have the list of the actions that have been executed with the corresponding results and the characteristics. And anytime you can decide to launch some extra action for performing maybe additional investigations. This is very important for, of course, supporting the threat intelligence, threat hunting, and let's say the overall enrichment of the different, let's say, IOC, which are automatically harvested out of the incidents. And this is a quick overview on the main functionalities of the Cloud SOAR, which helps to, let's say, improve the quality of the SOC operations.
All right. Thanks, Andrea. So, Matt, I wanted to get your perspective on what you saw, because I know you're an expert in everything SOC.
Yeah, Girish, thanks. No, I think I really like how I think what Andrea walked through, and what I hope a lot of our attendees take away from demonstrations like that, is how easy we can start to move towards an integrated platform. And one of the things I appreciate Andrea talking about during that was how fast he was able to move. Girish, I don't know if you caught all the time frames, but it was really a matter of seconds or minutes that he was able to move through different processes. And I know we're going to talk about kind of the playbook side of things in just a few minutes, but I really appreciate how quickly he was able to move through making decisions inside of the environment. And I think that is, or making decisions with the data. And I think that's something that a lot of our attendees should be focused on. Girish, we've talked about various types of metrics over the years that should be used. And one of my favorites is asking a security team how quickly can they move from a piece of data to making a decision about something. And I think Andrea did a very good job of demonstrating how a platform like yours can quickly move through that process as well. So I'm a big fan of watching efficiency in place, and I'm a big fan of seeing ways to take various data points and like I said, move through them a lot more efficiently. So Andrea, thank you for sharing that with us. I appreciate that. What about you, Girish? What are your thoughts?
Yeah,
From the Sumo Logic side, what are your thoughts on Sumo Logic?
yeah. So one thing, the subtlety there, I think Andrea did that very fine job. Thanks, Andrea. Was also he showed the integration with the cloud SIM. That way, it's instead of showing a piece, a one-off thing, what he was also showing is the integration. So, and that's what actually Victor is going to continue to build on, meaning. To your question about playbooks, right? And so regarding source, people make such a big deal about playbooks. Yeah, they're important because it's codification of a workflow or a standard operating procedure. However, it's made out to be significantly complex. So what Victor is going to do next is to kind of walk us through the next, how easy it is to create a playbook and actually get operationalize that. So
Yeah.
Carol,
hang on, Carol. Before you play, I just want to add one thing, or maybe continue that conversation a little bit further. You bring up an interesting point, which is a lot of times we just say, "Oh, make a playbook for that, make a playbook for this." And then I know Victor's going to walk through and talk about this, but as you're watching this, those of you in that defender role and that security operations role, as you're watching this, I want you to start to overlay some of your own environment into what Victor's going to walk through. I want you to start thinking about some of the processes he's going to talk about and the steps he's going to talk about. Start thinking about how that stacks up against what you do on a daily basis. And that's really, what I hope folks get out of this from a takeaway perspective is compare what you're seeing here to what your day-to-day looks like, and see if you can start to identify areas for efficiency there. So with that, sorry, Carol, I didn't mean to cut you off, but take it away.
Hi, everyone. Today, we are going to talk about playbooks, automation rule, incident templates, and how an analyst can automate a workflow from beginning to end. So, playbooks, along with the Open Integration Framework, are two of the core features that allow analysts to create workflows, automate and orchestrate technologies in Cloud SOAR. We'll create a playbook that will work with Cloud CM Enterprise insights, enrich these insights in order to extract the entities, signals, records, and all the necessary information to gather context for our incident. We will also set up the automation rule to automatically ingest insights from Cloud CM Enterprise and map information from the insight into the incident. Cloud SOAR leverages incident templates for the creation of incidents via automated rules. So we will also define a new incident template to be used into our automation rule. So let's start by reviewing our Cloud CM Enterprise integration. So integrations in Inkman can be easily imported with an upload. They are zip files which are published on our portal, and they contain multiple type of actions. We have containment, enrichment, notification, daemon, trigger, scheduled actions, and even custom actions. Different type of actions can be used in different sections of Cloud SOAR. For example, containment, enrichment, notification, custom, and scheduled can be used and invoked inside playbooks as a step of our process, while daemons and triggers are invoked outside playbooks. Today, we will work with the Sumo Logic Insight daemon to retrieve insights from CloudCM Enterprise. We have already defined a resource for our environment, and we can directly test the action to see the outcome of our execution without needing to configure anything else. So here we can test the action and see if we have any insight already. Here we see two results retrieved. Each one corresponds to an insight, and here we have the fields that are retrieved for each insight. The important field that we care about is the ID, which we will use into our enrichment action to retrieve the details of the insight, the name, and anything else that you may find interesting, you can map directly into a CloudSOAR custom field. So, for example, by copying this ID of the insight, we can now then use the enrichment get insight action, which requires the insight ID as an input, and retrieve all the details associated with this insight. In particular, the signals which were aggregated to generate this insight, the entities, and the records that are stored inside the signals. So this will be the action that we will use into our playbook as starting point to retrieve this information, and then we will dispatch an email notification with the details of the enrichment and the incident created, a note to store the content of the enrichment, and then use the update insight status to push a change back into CSE and move the status of the insight to in progress. So let's now define our incident template, which will be used from our automated rules to process new insights and automatically create incidents inside CloudSOAR. Incidents or triage event are the two entities which can automatically kick off the execution of a playbook. So in this case, we will leverage incidents since we care to use the nodes and the case management features. So let's give a name to this template, which can be something like insight enrichment. Category can be intelligence enrichment, and then populate the mandatory field that we have for our incident definition. These fields can change depending on your system configuration, so they are customizable. You can change the labels and you can change the values that are available into these menus. For example, kind, we can select incident response. Status, we can select from the status that we have here available, or we can create new values for our property status by writing a value that is not available yet into the platform, in this case, new. So now every incident will be open with the status new. We can do the same thing for category or type. So select the most appropriate category for this incident, the type, which can be threat intelligence enrichment, and the time zone, which in this case is +1 for us. And then create our incident template. On the right side, we can see the details of the template that we have created, and we can amend the fields, add further details. Below, we can add the playbooks, which will be automatically associated to this incident, and playbooks can automatically run, or they can be manually executed by analysts. So later, when we will have finished and published our playbook, we will go back to our incident template in order to attach the playbook that we will now create. Before creating our playbook, let's also define our automation rule, which will automatically process our insights periodically and map some of the properties of the insight inside our incident. So let's create a new automation rule, give it again a name that will allow us to understand what this is processing. So it can be insight enrichment. Select the appropriate integration daemon, in this case Sumo Logic Insight daemon. Select the resource, in this case the resource that we have already defined. We can define a custom scheduling period, the unit, the number, and also the time unit, so every minute, hour, day, week, or month. In this case, we can put the daemon to run every minute. And then to automatically map the last execution in order to keep track of the progress. After we have defined our automation rule, we can define the actions which our rule will take whenever it's matching a new insight. So in this case, we want to create an incident from a template and use the incident template that we have just defined, insight enrichment. So every time this rule is executed and a new insight is pulled from Cloud CM Enterprise, an incident will be created invoking this template using this specific naming convention and assigning as owner of the incident a specific user defined or a group, like in this case. So after that, we can complete our mapping part. So mapping is the functionality that allows us to extract any information for an insight. For example, the description must update insight ID or the name of the insight into a dedicated Cloud SOAR field. Cloud SOAR allows you to define custom fields, as we can see here, such as the insight name or the insight ID, which will be then used by playbooks to perform enrichment. By leveraging insight ID, we will be able to retrieve the details such as the entity and the signals which are associated with this specific insight. Let's now proceed with our playbook creation. In order to create a playbook, we can press on the plus button, assign the playbook a name, for example, insight enrichment, and then assign a type. The type can correspond to the type that we have assigned to our incident template, or we can also create a new custom value of type, like insight enrichment. And then we can populate the description to define what is the purpose of this playbook. After the playbook is created, we will be presented with the empty canvas where we can start building our playbook. So we can start by adding a new node, which will be type of enrichment action, and we will look for our get insight action. Get insight accepts one parameter, the insight ID, which we know will be mapped from our automation daemon into the insight ID incident field. So we can just configure this action to read the value from the insight ID field and retrieve the details of this specific insight. We can also change the name of the node to better describe the purpose of the action. Like in this case, retrieve full details of insight, and then create our enrichment action. After this, we can build a notification node which will dispatch an email containing the details of the SOAR incident and the details of our enrichment collected from the insight. So we can add a new node type of action, in this case notification, and use our send email. I will send the email to my address and prepare the subject and body. So subject and body are two text areas in which we can write formatted content. And thanks to the placeholder functionality, we can also retrieve the detail from the incident, for example, the incident status, category, short description, or any other field available inside the incident, or the output of any previous node inside our playbook. In this case, the retrieve full details from insight. So I will just copy a subject and notification from another playbook, which will leverage the placeholders to compile the body and notification. Okay, so the subject will be new incident, and with the placeholder of the incident ID. So every time in the email, we will know exactly from which incident from Cloud SOAR this email is coming from. And into the body, we have a series of placeholder which contain both the incident ID, but also details from the insight that generated the incident, like the name, the readable ID, the opening time, entity, status and severity, and the associated signals. So now we can copy the content of our email and create a note which will store the same content of our email notification. So under action custom, we can look for our add note action, add note, insight details, and paste into the note body the same content with the same placeholders that we have put into our email. We can also choose the title of the note, in this case, insight details. enrichment, create, and finally use our last action to update the status of our insight. So let's look for update insight status to in progress. We'll again retrieve the insight ID from our incident field insight ID. The status will be set to in progress, and we don't set any resolution since we are not closing the insight but only setting it to in progress. So we can now connect all the nodes properly and connect the last action to the end. So now we have completed our simple playbook, which automatically enriches any insight generated from our daemon, dispatches an email notification with the detail of the incident, its start time, and the details of the retrieved insight, stores a note for the analyst with the same content, and then moves the insight status to in progress. We can now save our playbook and publish it in order to make it officially available for the system and for our incident template. We can also give a description, which can be insight enrichment v1, and publish. Now, if we move back to our incident template and to our insight enrichment incident template, we can add our playbook here. So let's select our insight enrichment playbook and flag the autorun option in order to allow our playbook to automatically execute without the need of any analyst intervention. Now we can move back into our rules for insight enrichment and enable our rule to start ingesting insights from CloudCM Enterprise. If we move into our incident section, we should now be able to see new incidents which have been created with the status new based on our incident template. And if we move inside our incident, we can see in the middle the properties defined based on our incident template. On the left side, the original insight that triggered our incident creation with the ID and the readable name that we're mapping into our dedicated field inside ID, inside name. And then we can see the playbook which has been executed automatically. We can review the details extracted for our insight from the enrichment action. And we can also review the full JSON detail. So here we can see the entity involved. In this case, we have this specific IP right here. We can see the signals that compose our insight with the name of the signal, the stage, and all the appropriate details. After that, we have our note creation and our email notification and the change of status of the insight from any status to in progress. So here we can go and look at the new status of our insight and see the value to in progress. So into nodes, we can see the details that have been populated by the playbook. Here we have our incident ID, which corresponds to the label of the incident, the name of the insight, the opening time, the entity involved inside the attack, the status, which we changed to in progress, the initial severity of the insight, which is low, and the signals which were retrieved. And the same we can see inside our email notifications, which are coming through email. So here we can see some example of the body of the email notification, which again contains details from Cloud SOAR incident, the opening time, the ID, and details from the insight enrichment that we have just performed with our playbook automatically. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Victor. That was a good walkthrough. Matt, I know you work in this space a lot more than many of us. Apologies, our audience. I'm sure you have some experts as well. Your initial thoughts, Matt?
Yeah, I like how Victor walked through the ease of combining actions and data together. I think that's my biggest takeaway. I want to make sure, I know you've got a couple case studies to walk through, Grish, so I'll keep this one short, but I hope attendees were able to see how quickly Victor was able to walk through combining actions and really just putting a playbook together and starting from scratch and assessing, what do I want out of this? How do I want to be notified? What data points do I want to bring together? And then actually actioning off of that as it's combined and brought together. So really for me, the biggest takeaway is look how easy it was to take something like, the spear phishing attack, for example, and work your way through a playbook to help streamline a lot of those operations. So ease and simplicity, Grish, is my biggest takeaway. I always love it when we make lives easier for defenders.
Yeah, great points, Matt. Folks, what I'll do is I'll quickly go through a couple of customer success examples, and these are some, again, to Matt's point, when he started off, as you know, he talked about why automation orchestration helps you accelerate your incident response, MTTR, and all the good things, right? So I'm not going to read out everything that's here. The key point is what we are seeing. I'm sure other solution providers as well as SOC operators have realized the same thing. What we are seeing is solutions like SOAR is benefiting companies of all size across all verticals. Previously, I would have said, hey, FSI, government, and only the massive company organizations with massive scale. This is an example of a financial services industry that's fairly sophisticated, but then they not only used SOAR for their incident management and response capability, but also they used it to extend into fraud, specifically anti-fraud, and detect potentially fraudulent transactions. That was an interesting kind of, as their use case onboarding and they started doing more use cases, they realized they can expand it beyond the purview of what a traditional SOAR would do. And telcos are where we are seeing a lot of traction as well, where companies need the massive scale with human in the loop. And the third thing I'll say, I don't have a slide on this, is recently we were talking to one of the large research institutions in the United States, UC Davis. They have a very small team that's using our SOAR, and they have a very interesting way. They get more than 10,000, 12,000 daily alerts, right? Without a SOAR capability, they're just drown. And you would think they're an institution, but they're more than 150,000 users, right? Plus the attacks they get on a daily basis. That's 12,000 so-called alerts. If it's just a noisy SIM, right? So they don't happen to be using Sumo Logic Cloud SIM. I wish they did, but they use our SOAR. They use the SOAR in a way to manage, keep their sanity together, So anyway, so I want to have some time for questions if time permits. So what we want to do is, if you have any questions, reach out to any of us. So the best way is go to sumologic.com and go to our products webpage. There's tons of information on our Cloud SOAR. I'm Girish at sumologic.com. You can reach out to me as well. Reach out and look, we are in this together. Collectively, we need to solve the security operation and modernization challenges. So yeah, if there is anything we can do to help, let us know. Back to you, Carol.
All right, thanks. Well, we're just about out of time, so I'll squeeze one of these in here. This one asks, based on Matt's experience, does every security team or SOC need to use a SOAR?
Oh, yikes, Carol, that's quite the question to try and squeeze in the last minute there. My first initial answer is no. And the reason I say no to that one is because it's going to start by depending on maturity. If I say yes, I don't want anyone to think that they immediately need to go, oh, we need to go implement this thing now. What I want organizations to do, and I kind of talked about this in the beginning, is have that strong foundation of what the SOC's goal is, what you're trying to achieve, what your processes are, have those things in place, and then start to look for ways to automate, ways to integrate, ways to make things a little bit easier. If you find your analyst doing the same menial tasks over and over and over again, if you find yourself responding to the same type of incidents over again, anywhere you can decrease the repetition for humans and increase the repetition for computers is going to be a better win. So my initial answer is no, but that's because I put it on a sliding scale of maturity. The flip side of that is if you're in a large organization like Girish talked about, and you're dealing with the same thing again and again, and your team is just drowning in too much data and too many manual processes, then yes, you are definitely at that maturity point where you're ready to start to scale, above and beyond what you've got in place. So I tried to answer quickly, but that's a good question, Carol. I'm glad that one came in. Thank you. But otherwise, back to you. I think we're just about out of time.
Yes, we are, unfortunately. Thank you so much, Andrea, Matt, Girish, and Victor for your great presentation, and to Sumo Logic for sponsoring this webcast, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again the next SANS webcast.